Hello, my name is Isabel Rodriguez. I'm a second year graduate student at Oregon State University, and I was one of your MESA Day keynote speakers for the Saturday event. It's a bummer that we won't have a chance to come together, that we didn't have a chance to come together, because I was really excited to see some of your projects, which I know that you put a lot of hard work into. But sometimes we have to go with the flow and make it work, which is what STEM is all about, right? In fact, making it work is exactly what my journey through STEM has been all about. And today I get to share that story with you and how that story has shaped the journey that's yet to be written. There were three big events that helped shape my love of astronomy. The first was at age 7, seeing a comet Hale-Bopp, in the night sky on a nightly family walk, which we did pretty frequently. The next was around age 10 when I saw what would become my all-time favorite film, Contact. It featured a woman astronomer with a headstrong personality that I absolutely admired. And the third was using my very own telescope at age 13 to locate and view Mars while it was at its closest that it had been to Earth in nearly 60,000 years, an event that won't happen again until around 2287. Now, with a story that starts like this, it's pretty easy to imagine what comes next, right? I get inspired, I take apart appliances at home to build a radio telescope in the backyard, I win the science fair, a teacher says, "Okay girl, I see you," and helps nudge me onto the right career path, and I seamlessly make my way towards becoming an astronomer. Spoiler alert, that is not how my story went. To start, I had no idea of what it really meant to be an astronomer. I thought that all they did was memorize facts and use telescopes. While I devoured books, they were largely fiction. I was interested in art, photography, writing, theater. In high school, I excelled in algebra and biology, but I generally struggled with math, avoided calculus like the plague, and I straight up hated physics. When I graduated high school, I had reached the same level of academic achievement as my parents. So while I was expected that the next step for me was college, I lacked the guidance, the understanding of what college was all about, and we lacked the financial means for me to attend for more than a year or two. Once in college, I also realized that I lacked the skills and the community that I needed to persist, and 2 years later, I dropped out. As a side note, in those 2 years, I had taken everything from anthropology to Japanese to economics and skillfully managed to avoid taking physics and calculus. I'm sure you can kind of guess where this is going. It would be 4 years before I returned to college, and in that time I worked mostly as an educator for pre-K through middle school. I loved having jobs that allowed me to make a positive impact in my community, but I knew that something was missing. It also happened that it was during this time that I learned that there was a thing that you could do called astrophysics. In order to be an astrophysicist, I would need to work towards a PhD, whatever that meant. But that would involve immersing myself in the two subjects I had been so determined to avoid: physics and calculus. So it goes. When I started at Portland State University, they didn't have a major in astronomy, so majoring in physics was the next best thing. And after all of those years that I spent hiding from it, it turns out that physics was actually really cool. And calculus became one of my favorite math classes. Now don't get me wrong, I struggled, and I still do. But I also got to build really cool things. I got to do these neat experiments. I even got to use my art skills, my performing skills. I got to solve hard problems. And I had the chance to be a part of an incredible community of nerdy STEM students of color through the LSAM program. When I graduated, I spent the summer as an astrophysics intern at NASA, and the following fall, I started a PhD program at Oregon State University. And that's when things got real. Now, STEM is hard, and this is something that I'm sure you know, even just, from doing projects for something like this, right? It's not easy. Graduate school is hard. Corvallis is a small college town, and Oregon State is a predominantly white, traditional four-year institution. Coming in, I knew that I was going to be the only person that looked like me in my department. I would be moving from my family and friends, away from really good food, and I was moving to a place that didn't have a hair salon or a beauty supply store that catered to my Afro-textured hair. But I thought that if I just kept my head down and I worked really hard, that I would just be in and out in 4 years, not 6. I wanted to be out in 4. And that I would just simply be too busy for any of these things to have an impact. That did not work. As first-year graduate students, we were under the pressure of taking classes full-time while also teaching, and somehow also trying to find time to prepare for this really big test that would determine whether or not you could stay in the program. Right? If you failed this test, they would kick you out. Some of our professors would make us feel like our best wasn't good enough, and sometimes make us feel that we weren't good enough. On top of the isolation that I felt being only in my department, you bet I felt that impact, and there was no amount of work and keeping my head down that I could do to not experience that. It got to the point where physics no longer sparked joy. I experienced depression, I was tired all the time, and I cried a lot. By the time my first year was over, my GPA was at a 2.97, just shy of the graduate school's requirement of a 3.0. That summer, I decided to change tracks, going from a PhD to a master's, which would allow me to do 2 things: finish in 2 years instead of 4 or 6, and graduate with an advanced degree. And I promised myself that I wasn't going to leave without shaking up the system. So the first thing that I did was to share my story publicly. Next was finding student-led efforts to join into. I became a part of a Women of Color dance group to ground myself in joy. I was elected vice president of OSU's Black Graduate Student Association, and I helped to organize a group to bring together students from across different science majors. In my department, I was elected as a representative member of the Physics Graduate Student Committee, and in that role I helped to push for holding town hall style meetings that would give students the space to openly share their challenges that they have experienced in the department. In small part because of efforts like that big test that I talked about, well, recently the faculty voted to get rid of it in favor of something that is better suited to the tasks of assessing students. Now, this win gives me hope that we as students, really do have the power to work to achieve a better culture in STEM, one that looks at you, sees you, and values you as a whole person. Before I close, there are 3 lessons that I believe my journey so far has for me that I would like to share with you. Number 1, community, community, community. No one gets through this alone. Your communities will grow and change. Sometimes they'll start from scratch as you go through your journey, but take the time to build and maintain them. Number 2, take up space. When you walk into a room, even if others feel like you don't belong there, you own it. It takes work, and sometimes it can be exhausting. And that's why your community is key. And number 3, timelines are a myth. I just turned 30 last week, and I'm still figuring it out. You have time, I promise. I thought that by leaving my program, my PhD program, that I had failed, that somehow I was taking an L. But today I'm about 9 months from graduating with my master's degree in physics, and given where I started, that's huge. And when I graduate, I'll be making the switch from the S in STEM to the E in STEM as a software engineer, where I get to use both my science and my programming skills to help other scientists, which I think is pretty cool. Will I go back for my PhD? Maybe. The one thing I know is that it'll be there when I'm ready for the challenge. In the meantime, I got to be paid as a graduate student to do astrophysics, and I think that is something that would make childhood me very proud. So, in closing, wherever your individual journeys have taken you, and wherever they may take you, know that I'm proud of you, even if we didn't have a chance to meet in person. And I'm glad you're here and you're in this. And I encourage you to share your stories, share them with each other, and make sure to revisit them every now and again to see how they've changed, because the ways in which your stories change reflects how you've grown. Thank you.